There we go. Okay. In tonight's presentation, I am going to be talking with you about the wheel of life or circle of life. This is how they do it in the Institute of Integrated Nutrition. So this is the health coaching program that I went to. So we're going to be going through that exercise. And so I invite you to get out a piece of paper and a pen or pencil so that you can follow along and do this exercise with me. And hello, if in case you didn't realize, this is Anna Laura Brown, and host of the Autoimmune Rehab podcast at annalaurabrown.com and autoimmunerehab.com. And like I said in tonight's live, I am going to be going through this circle of life. So basically the way this circle of life works is that you have different spokes that create a circle, and these combine to create all the different aspects of what is considered primary foods by IIN. And so they consider primary foods to actually be all the different things that contribute to your overall health and well-being, whereas the food you actually eat itself is secondary food. And he's not a doctor, but Joshua Rosenthal, who actually is the founder of the Institute of Integrated Nutrition, also wrote a book called Primary Foods. That's really good. I can get you the resource for that if you'd like it, so you can post a comment wherever you're watching this if you would like to be able to get a copy of it. Okay, so so at the very top of this wheel, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start one at a time. And what I want you to do if you're following along on this exercise is to go through and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 as to where you think you are in each area. And then we'll talk about a little more about what that area means and a little bit about how you can work on improving in that area. So at the very top in the red there, we have spirituality. So I think it's appropriate that this one is at the very top, and I'm going to talk about this one first, because spirituality for everybody, and this doesn't mean necessarily religion, it can include religion if that happens to be your thing. Like for me personally, I'm a Christian and consider myself to be a pretty strong religious person as well as spirituality. But for some people that doesn't include that, but spirituality basically is anything, that your belief in a higher power, assuming you have one, or, for some people, it might be the universe, that kind of thing, but anything that creates that spiritual aspect of you. And I personally have a really strong opinion that we all have both a physical side to us and a spiritual side to us. And so as a result, if you're too far off base when it comes to spirituality, that's going to mess a lot of the other areas in your life up. So you want to be thinking about, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you doing with your spirituality? And like I said, if you're not doing really well in that area, I would say at least a 7, then you might really be having some struggles and challenges in other areas, partly because of that. Okay, so that's the first one. And what kinds of things can you do to improve your spirituality? Well, it's going to depend on the person, it's going to depend on your belief system, that kind of thing. But for me, it includes things like making sure that I attend church every Sunday, that I do daily meditations and prayers, that I do journaling, that I do daily scripture reading, things like that. For you, it might look a little differently, but whatever it is that you do to connect either with God, Heavenly Father, Jesus Christ, your higher power, or, spirit or universe, whatever your actual belief system is. Okay, then number 2 is creativity. And creativity is another one that isn't necessarily what people think it is. So when people hear the word creativity, a lot of times they think that creativity means that you have to engage in some kind of art or music. Now, obviously, creativity can include art or music, but it can include anything that you do to express any kind of creative activity. So that can mean things like art and drawing and music and things like that, but it also can include even things like sewing projects, craft projects, any kind of really even a lot of things related to business. When it comes to health and well-being, anything that you do that you feel like is expressing your creative side in any aspect could be considered creativity. Okay, the number 3 is finances. And finances is another one that if you are severely out of balance with your finances, then you're going to find that a lot of these others are going to get thrown off as well. So finances should be pretty obvious. That basically means, how are you doing when it comes to saving money? Are you investing for retirement? Do you have an emergency fund? Do you have a lot of debt? How much further are you going into debt? All that kind of thing is going to relate to your finances. And so, how do you fix that? Well, I'm definitely not a financial expert, but there are a lot of other people out there who are. There's different plans out there, whether it's something like the Baby Steps with Dave Ramsey, or, there's also a show I like to watch called The Money Guy, where they have what's called the financial order of operations, different things like that. But the real basics is that you should have at least Dave Ramsey only says $1,000. My opinion is more like it's going to depend on your needs and on how much high deductible of insurance policy you have. But my experience is you should have more like at least $3,000 and ideally $5,000 to $6,000 in the beginning if you can of an emergency fund. And then, work on first on getting rid of any high interest debt. So that would be like credit cards or anything that has an interest rate over 10%. Then work on getting rid of things like student loans that have lower interest rates, things like that, and build up an emergency fund, ideally of at least 6 to 12 months. Some things will say only 3 to 6 months. My opinion is based on the state of the world these days, you really want at least 6 months worth. And that typically is going to be based on what all the expenses that you would have to pay in a given month. So in other words, for example, for me, there are certain things that I feel like health and wellness wise, I really have to have in addition to things like my rent and my utilities and things like that. But there are additional things like a gym membership, some streaming. I don't eat out a lot, but I eat out maybe once a month. And, my food budget includes a little bit of fat, if you will, for some extra things. Always like to go out and have, I do things like have season tickets to the ballet, things like that. Those kinds of things are not included in an emergency fund number because they're not absolutely mandatory. So, the things that you would absolutely have to pay for, how much does that cost for 6 months? Okay, and then number 4 on here is your career. So your career includes, it may include a job, may include being self-employed, but anything that you are currently doing career-wise, how is that going? How is it? In other words, are you happy, satisfied? Do you have some kind of a job or career that you love, or do you feel like you need to make some improvements? Maybe you want to change, that kind of thing. So, where are you at with your career? And the main steps to take on some of that, for some people it's going to depend, but I would say if you're really not happy and satisfied or doing well there, one step may be to take some different career tests, do some exploring. I mean, I've discovered even ChatGPT is really good at this, at helping you figure out what other kinds of job titles or things you might want to go looking for. What kinds of things do you want to switch to? Do you want to become self-employed? What kind of thing would you do? All that kind of stuff. Then the next thing is education. And education is going to be, kind of like it sounds. Now, assuming you're not actually a student at the moment, which most of you watching this probably are not students, you want to rate, your lifelong learning, basically. In other words, how are you doing when it comes to reading books, learning things, self-development, all that kind of stuff. Because the reality is that we should all be engaged in some kind of education and learning from time to time, even after we're no longer going to school. Okay, the number 6 is your health. And that one should be pretty obvious. If you're watching this and you have, some kind of a challenge with autoimmunity or diabetes or overweight or things like that, then obviously, your health score really can't really justifiably be anything above a number 6. So you just need to kind of determine what that should be. And I just am getting a coughing spell. I'm going to need to grab some water here. There we go. And anyhow, yes. how are you doing health-wise? And, as far as how do you improve your health, well, it's going to depend on your situation. I don't do a lot of health coaching, but I do some. So, if you are feeling like you have a big need in that area and want to chat with me, reach out to me and we can talk about that one. Then number 7 is your physical activity. So this one should be pretty easy to rank because that's, just kind of like it says, how are you doing when it comes to your physical activity? Are you walking at least 5,000 to 6,000 steps a day? Are you doing exercise on a regular basis? Do you get up and move throughout the day? In other words, what's your physical activity look like? And obviously there's going to be some days when you're going to do more, some days when you're going to do less, but in general, how are you doing in that area? The number 8 is going to be your home cooking. So that's going to be another one you should be able to evaluate fairly easily. So how often are you eating out as opposed to how often are you cooking at home? And this is one of those where even if you enjoy eating out a lot, and even if you have the money to pay for it, you really probably shouldn't be eating out too much, just because generally speaking, now obviously there are some exceptions, there are some really good healthy-ish or healthier restaurant options, but for the most part, cooking at home is going to be healthier than eating out. So, you really should be cooking at home most of the time. The number 9 is home environment. So that includes things like, are you happy with the furniture? Are you happy with the way the home is laid out? Are you happy with your gardening or green space or yard or whatever it is? Do you have, is the situation that you're living with good and comfortable and contributing to your overall health and well-being, and the people that live in your house and all that kind of thing, and pets if you have any, that kind of thing. Then number 10 is your relationships. So that includes, could be a romantic relationship, could be, family relationships, could be neighbor relationships, relationships with coworkers. I mean, really relationships with anybody that you interact with on a daily basis. And that's another one that, how do you change that if you're not happy with it? Well, maybe go find some new friends, do some more social activities, things like that. And, in some cases, there may be some people you can't totally cut out of your life, even if you'd like to. But you get kind of the idea there. And that transitioned over into number 11, which is social life. So, if you feel like you don't have, maybe you don't have a romantic relationship and you want one, or maybe you don't have as many friends, that kind of thing, then one of the things that you can consider doing is having more of a social life and finding ways to engage more socially. And ideally not just virtually online or with apps and things, actually getting out and be joining some groups like meetup.com groups, things like that, to actually help you actually engage more with your social life. And then last but not least, the last one is joy. So that refers to all aspects of joy in your life. How happy are you as a person? Do you feel like you do things that are fun, things that give you joy? Do you have different things going on in your life that make you happy and increase your joy and your satisfaction? So now that you have rated 1 to 10 on all of these areas, and let me repeat them again, it's spirituality, creativity, finances, career, education, health, physical activity, home cooking, home environment, relationships, social life, and joy, then the next thing you want to do once you've done that is identify, I would say, 1 or 2 areas that you feel like you really want to work on improving over the course of the next 30, 60, or 90 days. And I personally would say that if you rated yourself really low in either spirituality, finances, health, or physical activity, that at least one of those ought to be the priority. Because in my experience and the experience of a lot of other people that I've worked with and talked to, if you have a good spiritual foundation, if your finances are in order, and if you're in fairly good health and you're engaging in physical activity on a regular basis, then a lot of these other things will naturally fall into alignment. Now, that said, you may be doing okay there, but maybe your career is out of alignment, or you have issues with your home environment and your relationships, then you may want to focus on those. However, I really recommend that you not pick more than 2 over the course of the next 30, like I said, 30, 60, 90 days, because trying to focus on more than that is just going to set you up for failure. So anyhow, hopefully you found this exercise helpful. And like I said, if you do want any additional help, please reach out. You can go to AnnalauraBrown.com to find the link on there that you can schedule a time for us to talk. And I hope you found this helpful. And I'm going to be starting to do these lives every Monday night, usually around 6 to 7 p.m. Mountain Time on starting in 2026. So I'm going to be going live probably 1 or 2 more times before the end of this year, and then I'm going to start my weekly lives. And so hopefully you will join me actually live for some of them, and if not, you can catch the recordings for the others. Thanks, take care, and I look forward to hearing from you and being able to share more with you soon.